They're going home. They're going home. Germany's going home. Korea 2. Germany 0. We all predicted that, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Korea, especially, I thought would be the team to take Germany out of the World Cup. I kind of feel bad for the Koreans. I was watching this game in a place that was literally half full of Mexicans and half full of Koreans. So they were losing their mind at the end of the game. I don't know if there was any Germans there. If there were, they were being very quiet, which is rare in this city because usually you find a lot of every 4-year German fans around. So, strange day.
Strange day. Mexico 0. Sweden 3. Jeez, this day, this World Cup, Duane. Whoever thought it was going to go chalk? Well, I guess we were wrong.
Mamma mia.
Jesus.
No, yeah, sorry. You know me and my ABBA. But look, I was obviously like many people. I had 2 screens in front of me, and I found myself mostly watching the Germany game in the first half because it became more and more compelling. But in the second half, it was almost the opposite. I was watching them equally. But when Sweden started to score those goals and you start to do the math and you're like, oh my God, Mexico might go out. And like no one even obviously we didn't conceptualize the idea of Germany going out at the start of the tournament. But at the start of the day, it was kind of a ha, this could happen, but it was possible, whereas it was like impossible that Mexico was going to go out at the start of the day until suddenly it very much wasn't. And that's what made the whole last 10 minutes, 20 minutes of those games so entertaining. It was, again, I used that March Madness comparison the other day. It felt like that again, where you were like going back and forth, what's happening here. At one point I was counting the cards because there was a point, Kevin, where had Germany scored a goal, it would have went down to fair play for the tiebreaker.
That would have been insane, and I have to say I was compelled by the Germany-Korea game, especially late in that game when, up until Korea scored their first goal in the 91st minute and then the second, I still believe Germany was going to score, right? Well, we've seen this happen time and time before. We've seen it in the second game of Germany. Like, they're going to get a shot late. They're going to get an opportunity, just like every team that needed to win over the last few days. They got it late in the games, and they were able to get the result by pressing forward. And then there was a Korea goal. And then I started to realize that, Germany's going out. They're not going to be able to score 2, never mind 3. And I was shocked. I still had the feeling that Germany was going to pull through, right? We've seen this story before. They always come out, and not yesterday.
Well, no, precisely. I mean, yeah, you mentioned the Korean goal, and then it was, of course, even like it was longer because it went to VAR. And at first, we saw the goal go in, and it was like, well, that's didn't look offside, and then I wasn't sure whether they were reviewing it, and then suddenly they were, and then you had to wait, and then it must have been torture for the Germans because they would have seen the video by then. They would have known that this was probably going to not go their way, but then it did, and then they had a second chance where it didn't go their way. So they basically had to be killed twice. And how long do you have to be killed? How often do you get killed twice? Yeah, and look, the thing about the Germany thing is the keeper. What's his name?
Neuer. Manuel Neuer.
No. I meant South Korea's.
Yes.
Cho Han-woo, I believe, is his name. If I'm saying that incorrectly slightly, I apologize to any South Korean listeners out there. But that save he made, that diving save off the header he made in the second half, I mean, that was the moment where I went, yeah, maybe Germany might not score in this game. It's they just were snake bitten at that point. That was a hell of a save, maybe the best save of the tournament so far.
And when you look at the Germany's choices now, with hindsight, after we know they're going home, Manuel Neuer hasn't played since September, right? He hasn't played all season. He had a broken foot. And other players like Robert Lewandowski, I know he's not playing for Germany, but just saying he's for Bayern Munich, and he's been having a terrible last few weeks of the season. And a lot of the players that are representing Germany that were selected by Joachim Löw might have been selected for loyalty reasons rather than ready for the World Cup reasons. And when you look at the results of the games, I guess this makes sense. I retweeted a funny tweet after the second game saying, it's too bad Germany doesn't have that type of player, a winger who's fast, who's tall, who can influence the game and maybe cross a few balls or head a few balls. Like, I don't know, like Leroy Sané. Oh, wait, he is German. Oh, wait, they choose not to pick him. Oh, wait, they made a mistake.
Well, no, yeah, the Sané jokes were flying a little bit too, and obviously as a Manchester City follower, I'm very familiar with this young player, and like many people was very surprised that they left him off, but then we went, well, they have so much depth that it's amazing that they can do this. But look, I don't know if he would have made all the difference, because really their problem wasn't necessarily creating, it was finishing, and they just didn't have the same finish that they did in 2014. Or even in 2014, they were more of a team concept, and they just weren't getting the roles this year. And I think it just illustrates how wide open this World Cup is. And we said that in the preview that I'd never, and you agreed, I think, that we'd never seen a World Cup in which there were so many teams where you could make an argument for. We still thought that the traditional powers would go through, because until you see them not, then you're going to. But no one's going to predict Germany. 17 times they'd been to a World Cup. 17 times they had gone through to the second round, to the round of 16 at the very least. Well, that streak is over. Actually, I think 16 times they'd gone through. This was the 17th. So, yeah, that was a great streak of brilliance, of excellence, 4 world championships. There's still no one's crying for Germany today. They've had a good run. And if you're a German fan out there, I'm sorry that you're not going to get a 4-year run, but you're still going to be one of the favorites in 2 years to win the Euro and in 4 years to win the World Cup again. So no one's crying for you today. It's just an illustration of how close the world is coming in the World Cup. And, we're saying all this without even talking about the team that topped this group. The other thing quickly,
Sweden.
Germany finished bottom of the group with that
finished
second goal. And the second goal was hilarious. So,
Neuer's close to the box, and the other side of the ball, he gets stripped of the ball, and the Korean guy's like, well, I'm going to try to get it from here. If not, one of our players is going to streak down and tap it in, which happened. 2-0 Germany. But you mentioned the Germany players. Here, look at the strikers. Thomas Müller and Mario Gomez. Is it 2010? Gomez could not make the team in 2010. And he was at his prime back then. Is he killing it in the Bundesliga in Wolfsburg? No. Why? That stubbornness of Joachim Löw to go with maybe players that he felt were a certain level, but that opinion has been biased by the win in Brazil. That opinion has been biased by is maybe lack of moving this team in the future, right? It's easy to win. It's not easy to win, but when you win, to stay there is something else. I don't know what it says, but this is just third straight World Cup where the defending champion gets out of the group. Is it something about complacency, lack of hunger, hard to motivate yourself, or maybe just because you think you're champion, head's a bit too big? It's a bit harder to train 100%, and you don't have that will or that effort to go through the third, fourth, fifth effort, which we've seen Korea yesterday. Korea wanted that game way more than Germany, even though Korea had no chance of getting out, basically.
Well, yeah, they had to win by 2 and have Sweden lose. So, they got the second goal, but Sweden by that point was already through. Yeah, look, it was, I don't know, it's hard to repeat. It's never happened before because for a reason, or it hasn't happened in a long time before. I'd have to look up quickly. I don't think it has. At any rate, it's a very difficult thing to do. And yeah, it's a difficult thing to do for a lot of reasons. Because first off, when you're at the top of the pedestal, people want to knock you off. That's a very real motivational factor for your opposition. But the other part of it is that to maintain that laser focus that you need to win a World Cup over the course of 4 years, over the course of 8 years, sometimes in whatever you're doing, or 6 years, I should say, if you're including the European Championships, is incredible. It's very, very difficult to do. And even a team as great as Germany 2014 was, and I want to just say that off top, Germany 2014 is one of the greatest teams I've ever seen. But it's not 2014 anymore. Those 4 years matter, and they just made a bit of a difference. Was he too loyal to older players? Maybe. But was he too stuck in his ways from 2014? Maybe. But it also could have just been something as simple as not having the same drive, not having the same desperation to prove something that they had in 2014 this time, and having teams like South Korea and Mexico in that first game be just a little more desperate. I mean, that's all. It's an intangible, and it's hard to pinpoint exactly why. And I'm normally a guy that doesn't like intangibles. I like to point to concrete numbers. But in a short tournament, I can point to concrete numbers in a 30-game season. In a 3-game group stage, the luck and kind of momentum, a role here matters a little bit more.
What I'm actually surprised too is the lack of evolution tactically of the German national team since 4 years ago. Right? If you stand still, if you stay the same, you're not. It's not the status quo in the world of sport. That's a falsehood. If you remain the same and not question what you do every single day and trying to evolve, the world is passing you by. Do you think the world passed Joachim Low by?
No, but I think maybe the world caught up to him a little bit, and he wasn't ever as brilliant as he was in 2014 as he was claimed to be in 2014, and he's not as bad as people are going to claim he is now. He'll probably resign. I'm sure that he will step aside before the Euros now because of this failure, but he's still a good manager. He's still a guy that's going to, he's one of the hardest working managers that you're ever going to see in professional football. Anyone that's read the book, and I'm struggling to remember the title of the book that was written on the German Revolution right now, but if you ever read that, you get a great look at sort of how Low was kind of the brains behind Klinsmann's charisma in that 2006 run, and then that they used that to propel themselves forward, which ultimately led in 2014. So, yeah, did the world pass him by? No, but I think that there's just other people out there that are equal to him that are stepping up and showing. It just comes down, Kevin. And I mean, look, I'm struggling to articulate this any better than this. It just comes down to the fact that there are more teams that are good enough to beat any other team in any given day now than there were even 4 years ago, and especially than there were 8 years ago, and really, really especially than there were 12, and so on and so forth.
I don't know if the gap has decreased, right? We talk about the contenders sometimes. We talk about contenders, pretenders, and fillers, right? You have the contenders of the World Cup. You have the pretenders, people that think they can win, but like England probably won't. And then you have the bottom, which is the group fillers. I guess the bridge, the gap, the space between those teams is a lot smaller than we handicap or than we believe sometimes. And we're us included, we like sometimes to talk about the great teams. Oh, they're so good. They're never going to concede. And well, at the world stage, international stage, I'm starting to believe that the gaps are a lot closer. Teams are not used to playing together to the same level, so you don't necessarily get the output of performance. It's not optimized, right? You don't get 100% out of every single player. If that was the case, Germany would have won 3 games. That's why I think it's fascinating to see the belief sometimes. Belief grow in the team, and this could be dangerous. Korea had the belief. I told you this yesterday before the game, Duane. Told you, the Korean manager has told them that, look, you got decent results. You played really well in your first 2 games, even though you weren't lucky maybe. You got a chance to prove yourselves against the best in the world. Believe. They did. And this goes across to Sweden. Can you imagine before the beginning of the game, the Sweden manager guys, we're going to win this, and we're winning the group. People yeah, it's Germany, Mexico. You know what's going to happen. But no, the belief was there. And I guess sometimes belief can bridge a gap.
Yeah. Believe can. I mean, I'm just pulled up the stats just real quickly to have a look at these as we talked about this and possession, it all. I'm just looking at them real quickly and trying to absorb them right now. Ultimately, look, this is a pretty even game when it comes right down to it. More than you'd think, more than I think you would have expected, and that speaks to a team that was set up to believe that they could compete with them. And as I said, I was around a lot of South Koreans, and they were there to watch their team and to cheer them on, and a lot of them were feigning surprise. We're talking about surprise over the fact that they were playing so well because they expected. I heard one woman say, I came here expecting him to lose 5-0, and this is awesome. And that was when it was 0-0. She was especially happy a few minutes later. So yeah, it's really, it's belief can go a long way in this. And it's, the Korea had more shots. They dribbled better. There's all sorts of stuff here. Go to Who Scored if you want to look at all of them. I'm not going to go through 600 things that half you don't understand or care about. But that's, belief matters. And look, Germany's out. What were you going to say? Germany is out of the World Cup in the group stage. Bracket buster. Have you looked at the bottom quadrant of the bracket? I put a tweet out yesterday. Like if you're England and Belgium, you don't want to win today.
Well, even then, it's not that bad either. Like, both sides are not that bad. You either go to the right side where Brazil is in with you, or you go to the left side where you have France and Argentina. But guess what? One of them will be gone before you face them for sure. So it's not that bad. And if you're like, okay, let's just touch on Mexico before we move on. Mexico lost 3-0, but you know what? They don't care. Mexicans across the world made best friends yesterday. South Korea and Mexico are now two nations closer than ever. The consulate of South Korea in Mexico City was paraded in the streets on people's shoulders, chugging tequila. That's the power of the World Cup.
There you go. Well, and I don't know if you saw this. The Mexicans and the Swedes, the fans that were at the game, there was a video that was released yesterday. Someone shot video of the meeting in the concourse. And this wasn't ominous. They were like dancing and jumping up and down with each other, singing, "Bye, bye, Germany. Bye, bye, Germany." It's like a very strange little mix of Spanish and Swedish together, but they were very happy together. So,
what song I had in my mind yesterday? It was "Bye, bye, low. Bye-bye, happiness. Hello, loneliness. I'm going home again."
Yeah. Look, you look at the quad. We have a couple quadrants that are set right now. So we know that there's going to be a semifinalist among Spain, Russia, Croatia, and Denmark. And we talked about that the other day. And Uruguay, Portugal, France, and Argentina as well. We don't have the full quadrant set out, but that bottom one of Sweden, Switzerland, which is a setup round of 16 match, and then you have the winners of Group H, which is either going to be Japan, Senegal, or Colombia. I mean, most people expect Colombia to figure that one out, so probably Colombia, and then you have the runners-up of Group G, which is either going to be England or Belgium. So that's an interesting quadrant.
Right, we know what's going to happen. We expect Colombia, so Japan's going to be Colombia, and Japan wins the group.
Yeah, and so then if you could imagine, if Japan wins a group, and then say
Senegal
England
second
loses today, it's going to be Sweden, Switzerland, England, Japan. One of those four teams will be in the semifinals. Not something you would expect at the start of the World Cup, but we still have a day to play out there, and it's a fool's errand, I should say. I always say fool's game. Fool's errand is the saying. Anyway, it's a fool's errand to try and make a prediction in this World Cup at this point. Anyone that's gambling on this thing, I mean, you can make some good money if you happen to nail the upsets, but no one is predicting consistently because it's not consistently predictable, really.
Brazil got the victory, and it was not necessarily a big test, but Brazil was able to do just enough to beat Serbia. Am I saying that Brazil looks good this tournament? No, they don't look like they were gelling. Don't look like they were clicking. Of course, Neymar has been known now this tournament for his flopping antics, and you have to say sometimes it's a bit over the top. I don't want to belabor this point. I just wanted to mention it quickly. But for Brazil, this team has not fired on all cylinders at all, but still managed to win the group and still managed to get out. Now, though, they have a trap game in the round of 16 in my mind. If you're Mexico, Duane, you forget the last game against Sweden. You remember what you did against Germany. And guess what? You probably have the belief you can beat Brazil. This game in a round of 16, like, those games are not easy. I would not be that shocked if Mexico was able to beat Brazil, or if like a Sweden beats Switzerland and Sweden's in the quarterfinals. There's potential there for an upset. And if you're Mexico, just play with the joy of the game. Play for the will to win and not for being afraid to lose, right? And yesterday they were afraid to lose. They lost 3-0. Just go back to your first game. Go back to your second game. Play it that way. And Mexico could beat Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, Brazil, I actually said this to someone I was with yesterday, is that they may be wearing the yellow tops and the blue bottoms, so they look like Brazil, but they don't look like Brazil. They got the win. Serbia wasn't all that inspiring. I mean, they had that great free kick in the first game by Kolarov, but other than that, I thought that they were a step behind for most of the World Cup. I didn't really expect much out of them. I've actually been quite impressed with Switzerland, although yesterday Costa Rica gave them everything and more. And again, what we're seeing, one of the things that is kind of refreshing to see in this World Cup are teams that have been eliminated in that third game just still going out and playing, almost playing with the joie de vivre that they wouldn't have had before, right? It's almost, stepping up and making these games very compelling. Even the dead rubbers. We only really had one true dead rubber in the World Cup, but you know what I mean? The games that don't have much going on.
France-Denmark was the only dead rubber, but you're right. South Korea, Panama, Costa Rica. All teams either eliminated or with a very slim chance to get out of the group with the third game. Battled hard, shown heart, and was able to make their fans that traveled to the stadium very proud. And that's, that's not too shabby. We talk a lot about, if I get to the dance and I get to go see Canada one day, and we score a goal and maybe get a result in the third game even though we're going home, I'm still going home happy, I guess.
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, there's not even a doubt about that. If they were to score a goal in any of the games, I'd probably go home happy. I'd go happy the fact they showed up even if they didn't score. But yeah, it's fun. Look, this morning's games are almost more compelling to me than anything else. Well, one thing we have noticed in this World Cup is the European teams have really stepped up. They are stepping up. There's going to be 3 quarterfinals from Europe at the minimum, probably going to be closer to 5 or 6. Based on the matchups we've seen. This group this morning, though, is going to be one where we're guaranteed to not have one out. I'm kind of cheering for Senegal to figure something out today because I'd like to see an African team in that final. Ideally, it would be, just add a little more flavor to it. But, it's been very interesting. I think the competitive balance is the thing, and that's what we just spoke of a minute ago. About those teams that have been eliminated stepping up and really providing entertainment in the final match speaks to that too. And maybe the difference between them in the first 2 games was a little bit of confidence or nerves that's taken off the table by the time you're eliminated and they don't go out and play. It's been a nice thing to see. The Costa Ricans, and we should Watson, we should probably mention that as MLS followers that one kind of didn't see that one coming. But the Whitecaps got a goal in the World Cup, so there you go.
Not just the Whitecaps, Montreal Impact too. Technically, Zamali is kind of like still in the contract. I don't know. But Blair Zamali scored a goal for Switzerland. And it was very reminiscent to when I used to see him score in Montreal last year, Duane. Zamali used to score when he gets frustrated a bit. It doesn't go his way. First few passes doesn't go through. Then he's like, F this. I'm taking the ball and I'm making it go. And he scores. And we've seen this happen a few times. And I have to say, I'm going to take the reporter and journalist hat off for a second, just putting it here. And I'm going to say it like this. Seeing someone that you talked to before score at a World Cup level, I had goosebumps.
No, I mean, it's when you have a little bit of a personal connection, even if a slight one, even a mention at one point, it's kind of fun for sure. That makes the World. One thing that I've always enjoyed the World Cup, obviously, but over the past, this is the second one that we've done together, and I did one with Rycroft. So that's 3 that I've talked about this on nearly a daily basis. And when you're talking about it as much as we do day in, day out, year in, year out in the club side, it makes it very enjoyable to watch a World Cup because so many more players from so many different teams. And it's just kind of, he's on that team I watched in the Europa League, and I enjoyed that game. It makes it more fun. So if you're a once every 4 year or once every 2 year fan that's happened to find this podcast and has added it to your daily take for the duration of the World Cup, I highly encourage you to at least watch the Champions League in between the World Cups because, first off, it's better football. But beyond that, you get to know the players a little bit more, and it makes the international competitions more meaningful. At least it has for me over the years because I think of my evolution as a fan. Back in the day when we could only get like one English game a week, and if that, to the point now that I watch, 7 games a day some days, that really it's added to not just my knowledge of the game, but my love and understanding of the game to watch more of it. So I doubt there's too many of those people around anymore, but every 4 years we are going to find new ones, and some of them might find a podcast like this and listen to it. So if you are new and you are listening to it, first off, welcome and thank you for listening. But second off, at least start watching the Champions League because it's going to make everything just so much better for you.
By the way, we want to thank every listener that tuned in and getting the show, Duane. We have crossed the 250,000 listeners since the beginning of the World Cup. So we would like to thank every single one of you over the last 2 weeks and a half who tuned in, who liked our show, liked it on Facebook, Twitter, liked our page, liked our Instagram posts. Everything we do. And by the way, if you like what we do, go to sportsinspired.ca. Get yourself a nice mug like this one. Just came in. You can order it at sportsinspired.ca. All the proceeds of sportsinspired.ca help builds the network and the opportunities for more of shows and more podcasts and better equipment. This is the idea behind Sports Inspired. Is it's a lot easier. It's easy to get sponsored by someone, but Duane, it's a bit harder to build something, but it's a bit more fun. So sportsinspired.ca, get your World Cup inspired collection, your SPN mug, SPN polo shirts. All prices are in Canadian dollars, and the price point is at the bare minimum. We're barely making anything on this. It's basically to have an opportunity for supporters groups in North America, Canada, Canadian Premier League supporters groups. If they want to store, we can make merchandise at a low price point in Canadian dollars. The goal is not to get rich. The goal is to grow the game.
Yeah, well, getting rich would be fun too. But yeah, and if you hear those advertisements at the start and the finish of the podcast, some of you do, most of you do, they're regionalized, so I don't know what you're hearing. But in my case, I hear an advertisement for a Lexus all the time when I re-listen to the show. And yes, I re-listen to the show to critique myself. For instance, I didn't say critique very well there, so I'll hear that when I do it again. So I just wonder if anyone's bought a Lexus because of listening to the show. I hope so. That'd be nice. Let us know if you bought a Lexus because you listen to Sports Podcasting Network. That would be amazing. Also, if you want to not listen to that, $5 a month on patreon.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
Exactly. And on Patreon, you can always give more. $2 a month will give you access to 2 Solitude Soccer podcasts and other things in the future to come too. If you're a cycling fan, if you're a sports, other sports fans, Tour de France is coming. You remember back in the day, I had Kevin talk cycling, but there's no French podcast about the Tour de France pretty much. And you know what? I took it upon myself to start one, and it's going to start later this week. So if you're a French francophone, you love the cycling world, you love the Tour, or you just want to discover it, make sure you follow me at Kev Laramee. Now, Duane, let's take a quick look at the matchup for the round of 16. By the time listeners listen to this, today's games will be underway, if not over. So Sweden, Switzerland in the round of 16. You know, if I'm playing Scrabble, this is worth a lot of points.
Sure. It's also, I think, probably when you're looking at the so far the round of 16 matchups, the one that I would least want to predict. There's a clear favorite. I think maybe Uruguay, Portugal is pretty even as well, but I think there's a clear favorite in every other matchup out there. This one is pretty even, and I kind of like that. And I kind of like the fact that one of those two teams, those unfancied European teams that, sort of just plug around, and it is going to be a quarterfinalist. And if you're Sweden, the Swedes are losing their mind over this. And it's kind of interesting that Sweden finally makes a breakthrough when they lose the 1,000-pound ego that used to lead them every week.
Is it a coincidence? Have you ever seen a Swedish team has united? Do you remember how Sweden used to look? It was basically 10 guys trying to give the ball to Zlatan, and Zlatan trying to make a show of himself and trying to score goals from half field all the time. You take the Z-Man out of the question. You have an incident of racism with the player that cost a free kick against Germany. He's born from Assyrian parents. We didn't even talk about this earlier this week, and I think it's a good segue. You had that incident. It's almost a team chemistry incident where he received 40,000 hate tweets on Instagram. Posts on Instagram. They're not tweets. Tweets on Twitter only. What I'm saying is there was a lot of backlash and racism versus the player born of Assyrian parents. He's born in Sweden, but with Assyrian parents descended. He was called terrible things that I'm not going to mention on the air. Racist and very narrow-minded and terrible words and expressions. And the whole team were behind him. He read a message and he's saying, I could spend time and be angry at everyone, but I'm gonna say thank you to people who support me. And all together, the Swedish national team with the coach said F racism. That was powerful. That's a moment that those players united together. They became one. And who knows what can happen? They could beat Switzerland. I wouldn't be that shocked.
Yeah, I heard a Swedish correspondent on the Guardian podcast say something very similar to what you said. So that's certainly something that's being reported in Sweden as well, that was a unifying moment and something that they weren't used to seeing and something that really has inspired this team. And we didn't really talk about that game very much so far. it was just really an incredible performance, unexpected performance. And whether it was Sweden playing well or Mexico playing poorly, I'm not 100% sure yet. Mexico does have a habit of not always being consistent when it comes to the World Cup, so it could have been a bit of both. But certainly, as I said, you have them against Switzerland, a team that has looked pretty good as well, and you flip a coin in that one. And either team going into the quarters is going to be a good story, I think, an unexpected story. It's a and then they're going to have I think a quarterfinal matchup that's not particularly that difficult to get. Sweden, there's a path. You could see them in the semis, and then what the hell? Who knows at that point, right? Maybe it's Sweden-Croatia in the semifinal. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Well, that can happen. Can it? Yeah, no, Croatia.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, they're both on the bottom half.
But they're on the other side though. Because on one side, you have Spain, Russia, Croatia, Denmark, Brazil, Mexico, and the winner of Group H, winner of Group G. And on the other side, you have Uruguay, Portugal, France, Argentina, Sweden, Switzerland, winner of Group G, and runner-up of Group H.
The bracket I'm looking at says the opposite, but we'll let people Google that.
Yeah, it's weird. Anyways, so that's the question. Brazil, Mexico, Sweden, Switzerland. Yeah, it will be a great matchup. So who knows what can happen. Croatia still looks like a very, very well-positioned favorite. And it'll depend on the quarterfinals, Spain or Russia.
Yeah, well, okay, maybe, sure. Yeah, okay.
So see who they face in the quarterfinals. But can you imagine a Spain-Croatia? That could be a great quarterfinals. And then it's almost a shame that we're losing one of those two anyways.
No, we talked about that the other day for sure. I guess today maybe a good way to wrap this would be to talk a little bit about real quickly, because as you say, by 2:00, many people will have already been maybe just starting to listen to this. But do you play this game? Do you try and slot into the group? This is a general conversation that has a origin in the England-Belgium possibilities. But is it a good idea to try and manipulate where you are in the draw, or as Southgate said earlier in an interview this week, should you just try and win every game? That's a question that I have, because it is an easier draw where you go in as the runner-up for sure. But I don't know. What do you think on that?
He who chooses worse. That I do believe. And if you shut it down, can you restart it up in time? That's my belief. But we know the starting 11 of England already. And there were 8 changes of the starting 11. Vardy's starting, and Sterling is back, and Kane's on the bench. And there's a lot of changes here, which means that if you win, great. You got momentum. You win the group. Moving on. You lose, no problem. Get back the first team in, and confidence is not affected, and you got an easier group, an easier path to the semi. So it's almost a no-lose situation where just go out and play. Don't even think about the score. Don't even think about where you're going to land. And that's pretty much an oxymoron, because of course you're going to think about it. And of course you're going to look at the screen and see what the score of the other game, even though it's not really that important. If you're England, just play. Just play and see how it unfolds.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's the right answer. But as a fan, I think I'll forgive you if you're like okay with a loss today, if it's going to place you in a more favorable position. But we've had this conversation before. We had this conversation with our Gold Cup coverage with the country we're in, Canada, a few years ago, where a Canada loss would have set them up to play on a better side of the bracket. But we decided at that point that it would be better to just win forward. And, well, they did, and then it didn't work out anyway. But that's fine. You just got to keep playing well. That's the key to this thing. And this is so wide open. I look at all of these teams, and no one is jumping out as the absolute favorite. And I think that, as much as the fact that there's evenness, is the big thing. Like, I mean, is Croatia the best team in the tournament so far? Probably. Does anyone want to say Croatia's the favorite to win the World Cup? Probably not, because it's just hard to wrap your head around that.
Yep, exactly. All right, so for today, that will be all. As always, don't forget to follow Duane at 24th Minute, myself at Laramee. We'll prepare ourselves mentally for the 10 a.m. and especially the 2 p.m. games today. Is it coming home? I don't know, but I saw some great gifs of 3 animated lions singing the 3 lions, and it was dusty in here. Let's put it this way.
There you go.
As always, Duane is located on Twitter at 24th Minute, myself at Laramee. Podcast versions of our shows are available at sportspodcastingnetwork.com anywhere you get your podcasts, iTunes, Apple Play Store, Google Play Store, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find World Cup Today. After the World Cup, we're back to soccer today, so make sure you subscribe to make sure you listen to us talk about one of the greatest leagues in the world, MLS, and of course, the world of football with the soccer perspective. After July 15th, we are back with Soccer Today. And get your SPN mug and SPN merchandise and sports-inspired merchandise at sportsinspired.ca. As always, until tomorrow, have a great soccer.